Well, good morning, friends. Welcome back to Second Cup. And it is Monday, and with all of Monday's things of readjustments and trying to set up the studio again. And thanks for tuning in and letting me do the focus check and the adjustment left to right. It's not quite right, but it'll do for now. Hope you're having a great week. Good start. It's great weather here, and we're enjoying that. Well, hey, let me just talk to you for a second about some misunderstandings, right? We love misunderstandings in a sitcom, right? It's very funny. Somebody says something, but it's taken a different way, or it's out of context. And the person walks around for the rest of the 20 minutes or 30 minutes thinking one thing, and acting on that as if that's the truth. And then in the end, the truth is revealed and everything is resolved. Half an hour, everything's fine. Well, that's all fun and games. Everyone loves a misunderstanding when it's Jackie Gleason and he's trying to figure out why the spacemen have invaded or whatever on Honeymooners. Or maybe it's something that you tell a joke and it's intended to be misunderstanding. That's all. And you're asking questions, you're banging your head against the wall and trying to figure out. That's no fun. Can you imagine the disciples in the first century as they walked with Jesus? Jesus kept using these parables, and there were times that he would tell a story and everyone would kind of, I don't understand. You give the impression that or doesn't get the point, but really inside you don't. And the disciples are like that. And so we've seen this illustration where they listen to the story, they listen to the parable, and then it's later on that they come to Jesus and say, that story you told, we don't understand it at all. Well, now it's getting worse, because when we go to chapter 8, it says, now they had forgotten to bring bread, and they only had one loaf with them in the boat. Again, the loaves of bread and feeding hungry people in desolated places, isolated situations, definitely have been a response that Jesus gives to them. Mark says, and he cautioned them. Now, they're probably expecting that they're going to get now when we pull out, guys, make sure that we have enough bread to feed everybody. That should be rule number one. Make sure we have enough cargo on board. And so they're kind of expecting that. And so when he begins to caution them, begins to warn them, begins to even a slight rebuke here, he says, watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. And they began discussing with one another the fact that they had no bread. Right? They're on one wavelength and Jesus is on another wavelength. And Jesus, aware of this, said to them, why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Did you not yet perceive or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces did you take up? They said, 12. And the 7 for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of broken pieces? And he said to them, do you not yet understand? And again, as Jesus describes that to the disciples, what he's talking about is they're talking about bread. He's talking about leaven. Then he switches back and talks about the miracles that they've seen, both the feeding of the 5,000 earlier in Mark and the feeding of the 4,000 just a few paragraphs above. The challenge here is that the disciples, they just didn't plan ahead. They weren't forward thinking. They were only seeing what was right in front of them. And so that sometimes caused them some misunderstanding, because they had a focus on what's happening right in their life. And so Jesus would say something that's about the future, and they would go, I don't know, I have any idea what he's talking about. One loaf was way too little for them, and they were 12 of them, and there was no way that they're going to make one loaf go for all 12 of them, plus Jesus is 13. How in the world are we going to make one loaf spread for all of us? But in chapter 8, we have 4,000 fed. In chapter 6, we have 5,000 fed, with the percentage, right, was greater than this gap. How many times do we have misunderstanding of what God is doing? We begin to pretend that God did miracles in the first century, but can't do miracles today. He can't provide for us in a miraculous way. He can't make loaves extend. He can't make us be satisfied with what we have. Doing miracles. If you do, you're going to live a very much a life of what you see is what you get. Very much not faith life. And so I want to encourage you, don't fall into the same trap that the disciples had. Then Jesus cautions them. He gives them correction. This is more along the line of a correction of a coach. It's that he wants the best for me. Truly, this of being together with Jesus was for their benefit. He says, beware the leaven of the Pharisees, the religious leaders of the day, and the leaven of Herod. If it's the leaven of Herod, as the ESV suggests, it's the leaven perhaps of this political leader that we saw back in a few chapters ago, where he takes off the head of John. Herod was an unbeliever. He had all this stuff in front of him. He had John in front of him who kept challenging him and kept cautioning him and kept rebuking him. And he gave up. He quit. He gave into this. He had conviction. He was convicted in his heart, but he didn't have any change. He silenced the prophets. The Pharisee of the 11 of the Pharisees is about performance. The Pharisees tended to be non-believers because they were going to do more. They had outward deeds and purity, but they desired more signs and proof. They weren't believers. They were having ears but not hearing, which is what Jesus challenged the disciples. Are you in that category? Are you in that category? And so they wanted more signs, and Herod wanted to silence the signs. He wanted to silence the one who's speaking truth. It's also possible that it's beware the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of the Herodians. Back in chapter 3, they are mentioned in collaboration with the Pharisees to undo Jesus, to kill him, to plot together. And it's possible that that's what the reference is. But the point that comes down to the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod is something to do with this infectious unbelief, this unbelief that spreads wildly. As one person doesn't believe, he begins to spread that disbelief among the group until the whole group is not believing, the Pharisees and the Herodians, or Herod himself. So Jesus says this wild, infectious thought of no faith in light of having Jesus, that's the kind of leaven that you need to avoid. Beware of seeing Jesus up close and personal and not believing. Beware of the unbelief that steals the rising of faith in your life. Why are you discussing bread, Jesus says? That's not the point. He challenges the disciples. He said, don't you yet perceive or understand? And what's the answer? The answer is, I see you don't. I see you don't understand yet. Are your hearts hardened? Again, Jesus is asking a question that the way he's asking implies that he thinks the answer is, yes, you probably are. Yes, you still don't perceive. Are your hearts hardened? I think they might be, is his answer. Remember back in chapter 6, verse 52, there is a discussion of the hardness of their hearts and their unbelief. The familiarity, they knew Jesus and they were hearing him, but they weren't hearing him. There was a misunderstanding, a disconnect. They are like the soils that are hard from lots of treading on them, like the path in chapter 4, verse 4. They have eyes and do not see. They have ears and do not hear. I think this is so. Do you not remember, Jesus asks? I'm going to remind you. And this is what he sets out. He says, don't you remember that when 5 loaves and 5,000 people were there, you remember that with 7 loaves and 4,000 people, you picked up 7 baskets of leftovers? Don't you understand? 1 loaf and 13 of us, it's enough. Believe that I am able to provide for you. So how are we supposed to apply this to our lives? Obviously, we're not on a boat with Jesus. We don't have one loaf of bread to spread around through 13 of us. We haven't seen the miracles in person. We've only read about them here in the book of Mark. Well, I think the challenge is that we ought to beware the leavens too. The things that are tempting to overwhelm our loaf of faith, that take the loaf to disbelief, that take us to disbelief. Beware those same sort of things that harden us and cause us to not be convicted. We need to beware the hardness of heart, a quick forgettery, not remembering what Jesus has done in the past, not remembering the things that we've read in the gospel, not applying these things to our lives. We put all of our attention, we need to be careful not putting all our attention on the physical stuff of life. We make everything about food, or in the church, sometimes we make it all about finances. What's our budget? What's our deficit? How many people came this week? How about how many people believed? How is faith enlarged today in this ministry? How have we grown in our understanding of who Jesus is? Not misunderstanding, not going off in our own direction, not hardening our hearts with unbelief. Jesus literally is all that we need. He's the provision for life. And we say it this way, that Jesus is our helper. He's our savior. He's our rescuer. He's our one who comes alongside. In fact, he sent the Spirit as a second helper, another comforter. While he is back in heaven, now the Spirit is ministering to us what Jesus did to these disciples. The disciples are anxious, Edwards says, about the lack of bread, but Jesus is anxious about their lack of faith. Where are you today, friend? Are you at a place of lack of faith? Has your faith been stolen by circumstances? Have you put all your attention on the things that are right in front of you that are threatening you? Or have you trusted Christ? Have you trusted him with today? Monday, the week that lies in front, even though you don't know how it's going to play out, have you gone back to him and said, I trust you. Grow my faith in this moment. Make much of you in my life. Remind me of you going with me. And let me take care of taking all that leaven of disbelief, all that leaven of trying to motivate or maneuver so that I can get to my own spot, my own importance. Let me not be one who is trying to be in charge of my life. But let me surrender to Christ. I hope you're there. I hope that you're growing in this understanding of who Jesus is, that you're not letting the misunderstanding of who he is cloud what you're thinking, that your trust makes you calm. Well, I'm praying to that end, that that'll happen in your life, that you'll come to an understanding of who Jesus is, and then he'll grow sweeter and sweeter as the days go by, that the relationship is way more important than whether or not you have enough bread or enough gas or enough money or enough power, or enough fame or enough house or enough boat or whatever it is that you think you need more of. Would you drill down deep into who Jesus is? Would you make that the focus of your day today? I believe that you'll find that if you do, you will find that he is enough. Let's trust him today. Friends, I'm praying for you that that'll happen in your life. And until I see you tomorrow, blessings on you as you obey and allow your faith to grow in Christ. Bye-bye.